Congratulations, you made it to the next round of the fantasy playoffs. However, so many players got injured last week. So in today's video, we're going to talk about running backs you should start or sit in week 16. We've got 32 teams in play, 16 matchups, and I'm going to rank every single running back. All I ask in return is that you hit that little thumbs up button for me. Let's start off with Thursday Night Football. We've got the Rams at the Seahawks, 44.5-point over-under. Now, the Rams are favored in Seattle, but it's a 1.5-point spread. It's really like a who do you got type matchup. This could go either way. This is very important, obviously, to the NFC West division. So both of these teams should be on their P's and Q's, ready to get into this game with some tenacious effort. Now, Kyren Williams is the only player that I would start with the utmost confidence in this matchup. We do need to break down that Rams backfield for a second. Here's what I'll say. Neither of these defenses are defenses that you relatively are excited about facing off against in fantasy football. They're both pretty good against the run game, so it's not a plus matchup for either of these teams. But last week, the Rams, it had been happening over the course of 4 weeks where Blake Corum's role was starting to really grow. But last week, he had actually a career high in snap percentage. He had 33 snaps, 39 to Kyren Williams, 11 to 16 touches. Obviously, they both played really well. Kyren ends up with 2 touchdowns. Blake Corum averages almost 7 yards per carry and a touchdown. He has looked absolutely incredible as of late. And like I said, this is a career high in snap percentage, almost over or right at that 50% mark. So we could see Kyren start to lose more and more opportunities. I mean, it's already happening, but it's not exactly the best time to be happening in the fantasy playoffs. I still think you trust Kyren Williams more than Blake Corum at this point, simply because if they're down and they're needing to throw the ball, I do anticipate Kyren Williams getting more of those opportunities through the air. He is the more guaranteed guy at the goal line. But if you're in a desperate scenario and you have no one guaranteed that you can start because of injuries, Blake Corum is not the worst start. He's my RB29, so he's a mid RB3, desperation flex, desperation RB2. I'm not starting with confidence, but because of the offense that he's a part of, the opportunities that he's getting, he is not the worst play in the world. So those guys are startable. Kyren's the only must start in this matchup. And then, just quickly on the Seahawks backfield, I mean, I just don't really know what we need to see at this point to ever trust these Seahawks running backs. One of them could have 30 points this week, and I still wouldn't trust to start them next week in the fantasy championship. There's just no trust at all whatsoever built anymore. We keep hearing them say they want to feature Ken Walker, and they'll do it for a week, and then it's back to a split backfield. Well, last week, we pretty much saw the same thing again. Zach Charbonnet actually outsnapped Ken Walker, and despite Ken Walker having one more touch than Zach Charbonnet, both of them are complete eggs in fantasy football, 3 and 2.9 points. So I think they're fairly risky starts. It's not a good matchup anyway, and they really like to feature their wide receivers on this team. So I would say 9 out of 10 of you guys have a much better play than Walker or Charbonnet this week. Okay, we are not jumping to Sunday. We're jumping to Saturday. That's right. We have 2 Saturday games this week. So make sure you're setting your lineups early and you're ready to go. Let's start off with the Eagles at the Commanders. 44.5-point over under. The Eagles are favored by 5.5 points. I think they should be heavier favorites personally, but here we are. Saquon Barkley, my RB5 on the week. Start him with a ton of confidence. He has now put together back-to-back games where he's looked like a superstar again. Now he gets to play the Commanders, who are the 5th best matchup for your fantasy running backs. Start him with the utmost confidence. Now, on the opposite side, what you need to know is that Jaden Daniels is not going to play for the rest of the season here in 2025. They're going to go ahead and let him rest up that shoulder. They're going to, as well as the elbow, and they're going to focus towards 2026 with him. So it will be Marcus Mariota from here on out. That automatically makes me question, I know Mariota's been fine, but that was against the Giants. I'm not sure, how he's going to fare against the Eagles. It just makes me question the offense as a whole. That's what I'm trying to say here. Now, we don't know if Chris Rodriguez is going to play or not. If he does play, I would anticipate him and Bill Krosky-Merritt getting, looks for both of those guys. I would expect Jeremy McNichols to be the guy that they put out there. If they're down in the game, needing to come back. So ultimately, there's just not enough trust for me built if all these guys are healthy to have any of them touch my lineup, not with your life on the line. Now, if Chris Rodriguez is out, Bill Krosky-Merritt can be, a desperation play if you need a desperation RB2, but he's a Hail Mary at best, okay? You're not facing the Giants like you did last week. You're facing the Eagles. You're probably going to be down, and you're probably not going to get many targets for Bill Krosky-Merritt. Okay, let's jump to the Packers at the Bears. This is the other Saturday game. 46.5-point over under. It's a 2.5-point spread in favor of Green Bay. Obviously, you know, we've got some divisional games that really matter this week. Josh Jacobs is an auto start, obviously coming off that big day last week. You're going to put him into your lineups. Bears are kind of middle of the pack against running backs, but Josh Jacobs is a superstar. You're going to play him each and every day. Now, the Bears backfield, we got a little bit more confidence, I would say, this last week in DeAndre Swift. Before that point, it was kind of back and forth between Monangai and Swift, and the roles were kind of interchanging at times. Monangai might have more of the goal line role. This week, we saw a lot more DeAndre Swift in those important fantasy roles. DeAndre Swift led the way in snaps. He also had 19 touches to 13. So obviously it can change each and every week, but these guys have had good days off and on. DeAndre Swift is the only one that I trust. I don't trust him enough to label him a must start, but he is a low-end RB2, a flex play, my RB21 this week. And obviously with the injuries to their wide receiver room, these running backs are going to be really important. Monangai is harder to trust at this point. You know, we've had quite a few busts in recent weeks, so I'd be very cautious playing him. Moving forward, you're going to have to be in a scenario where the Bears are up dominating, and I don't see that happening against the Green Bay Packers. Okay, that brings us to the start of the Sunday slate of games. We got the Bucks at the Panthers. Now, 45.5-point over under. The Bucks are favored by 2.5 points. This game is so important for the division. Don't expect the Panthers, don't expect the Bucks to hold back. Okay, you're going to see a lot of these teams going for fourth downs, not settling for field goals. This game is super important to the division. One of these guys is going to be in the playoffs, and this game is going to be almost deciding that, okay, here on Sunday. Bucky Irving is my RB10. We're going to go ahead and say he's a start this week. Look, if you're frustrated by the usage on the goal line of Sean Tucker, so am I. I'm also annoyed by it. Here's what's frustrating. Bucky Irving last week completely dominated opportunities for these running backs, right? 18 touches. Rachaad White had 2, and Sean Tucker had 4. Sean Tucker played 8 total snaps, and by the way, they were almost all of them on the goal line. For some reason, Todd Bowles and Josh Grizzard are putting us in hell on purpose. It's a social experiment. We are in a simulation, and unfortunately, Sean Tucker comes in on the goal line. Here's the deal. 2 out of his 3 games, Bucky Irving has scored a touchdown, so it's not like he can't score touchdowns. Let's not be prisoners of the moment. I'm going to put Bucky in there. They know he's their best running back. They've got to win the game. I expect big things from him this week. Now, on the opposite side there, we did see, it's another backfield. I mean, how many backfields this year, guys, have we seen this flip-flop back and forth? It seems like so many running backs are swapping roles each and every week. And for example, last week, Chuba Hubbard was the dominant guy for the Carolina Panthers. Well, this week, Rico Dowdle was the dominant guy, right? He had 18 total touches, 16 rushing attempts. Chuba Hubbard with 8 rushing attempts. And obviously, we also saw Rico Dowdle get into the end zone. So although it is very difficult to project from one week to the next, Rico Dowdle is the running back that I'm going to trust in this backfield. He would be my start in this game. Both of these teams desperately needing to win. Chuba Hubbard, I would not be surprised if he gets into the end zone or gets plenty of work, but he is much more a desperation RB3/4 than a start this week, in my opinion. Okay, let's jump to the Bills at the Browns. 42.5-point over under. The Bills are favored by 10.5 points. That is the second largest spread of the week. And again, it's in favor of Buffalo. That number would be higher if it was in Buffalo, but it's in Cleveland. James Cook is the only name in this game that I think you can start with the utmost confidence, okay? This is a guy that has brought you to round 2 of the playoffs. He's brought you to the fantasy playoffs, hopefully a fantasy championship. He's a big pivotal reason why you're there. You're going to play him even though it's against the Cleveland Browns, who have actually fallen off a little bit in recent weeks against running backs. They're much easier in second half than the first half. Now, Quinshon Judkins, we need to have a very serious conversation, okay? We need to have a serious conversation about Quinshon Judkins because there has been bust after bust after bust, and not the type of bust that you want, all right? The bad bust, okay? Quinshon Judkins is failing fantasy owners. In fact, a lot of people who had Judkins probably didn't make it to the next round, so you're lucky if you did. He had 4.7 fantasy points last week in a game that had no Dylan Sampson, no Jerome Ford. This is just not a good offense. The offensive line is terrible. They're not able to open up running lanes, and they're typically down in games, so they can't even establish the run. He's not a focal point of the passing attack either. So I would be very cautious starting Quinshon Judkins. The only reason he's a spot start and not a risky start label for me, the only reason he's in that top 25 is because he plays the Bills, and the one area you want to attack the Bills is on the ground, as they give up the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. They're top 5 in rushing yards allowed per game as well. So that's the only reason I'm even considering starting him. I think he more has like a 10, I'd say 8 to a 12-point game than any sort of big blow-up game. But again, be very cautious. My RB25, he really is on that fringe of a spot in a desperation play, spot start in a desperation play. So proceed with caution. He's my RB25. Again, all of the running backs are ranked in today's video. Okay, the next matchup we'll look at here is the Chargers at the Cowboys. 49.5-point over under, third highest of the week. The spread is 1.5 points. So this has all the fixins of a big day for fantasy football, a big game for fantasy football. Now, Amarion Hampton and Kamani Vidal, this is another backfield where, again, the load is being shared. I mean, that is becoming a bigger trend in the last couple of years. This year, maybe more than ever, we have seen these split backfields, and it's been killer for fantasy football. In this last game, Kamani Vidal, back-to-back weeks where he led the way in snaps. However, this week, we did see Amarion Hampton with more opportunities, 16 to 13 opportunities, but it doesn't look like Kamani Vidal is going to go away, so there's no way I can put Amarion Hampton in that must-start category. All right, we just can't put him in that light at this point, because who knows between Hampton and Vidal, which guy's going to score more points. I do expect Hampton to continue to get the majority or the most touches in this backfield, rather, is what I should say. And on your screen, you're going to see that the Cowboys are the 6th best matchup for your running back. However, that doesn't really take into account since the team brought in Quinnen Williams, because since they brought in Quinnen Williams, they have been a much harder team to run against. In fact, they've been bottom 10 in the league, as far as rushing yards allowed per game. They've been a tough matchup. So I'd be very hesitant to start Hampton and Vidal unless they're truly your best option. Maybe you have some sort of injury. You could put Hampton in there. We know how talented he is, first round pick, but otherwise I'd like to avoid that situation if I can. Now, on the opposite side there, the Chargers are a top 10 matchup for your running back. If Javonte Williams is healthy and he's ready to go, you're going to place him straight into your lineup with confidence. A part of that offense, high-powered offense, always putting up big points. He always has opportunities. Now, obviously, we know he left last week's game with the shoulder injury. He did end up coming back, so I'm anticipating that he will be ready for this game. However, if he is out, Malik Davis would be the next guy up, in my opinion, and I have ranked him as the RB26 in the event that Javonte Williams is out. However, there might be a split between a couple other names. We might see Hunter Lepke get involved. The only reason I'm giving Malik Davis respect is because of the offense that he would be a part of, and I would assume he'd get the majority of the work. Okay, let's jump to the Jets at the Saints. No player in this game that I'm comfortable to start with any sort of confidence. You got two teams that are really, really battling for draft pick position at this point. I know obviously everybody's playing for pride, right? But low over under at 40.5 points. The Saints are favored at home by 4.5. This would be a really good Devin Neal game. However, I'm projecting him to miss this week. He left last week's game with the hamstring pretty much right after he scores the touchdown. He leaves the game with the hamstring injury. He didn't come back. That is not a good sign. I'd say 7 out of 10 times that player is going to miss the next week. Now, you would anticipate Audric Estime being the next guy up, based off what we saw on Sunday, because when we have no Alvin Kamara, we have no Devin Neal, and we have no Kendre Miller, they have gone to Audric Estime as their preferred running back. Obviously, Evan Hull has also been involved. It could be a split backfield between Estime and Hull. That could be a reality, which is why ultimately it's so messy. If Devin Neal's not out there or Alvin Kamara isn't playing, I'm going to label Audric Estime a risky start. He's like borderline RB4. I'm not sure you should really start him with any sort of confidence at this point. Now, if Alvin Kamara is active, then I think he becomes a spot start, because against the Jets, it's a good matchup. They're the 4th best matchup for your running backs. That's really the only scenario I'm playing a Saints running back this week. On the opposite side, I'd love to tell you to go out there and start Breece Hall with confidence, but we've had too many weeks where he's been a disappointment. I mean, that's just honest look at this backfield at this point, right? I mean, last week, for example, against the Jags, they got absolutely bum rushed, okay? And we saw Isaiah Davis finish the game with the most rushing yards of any running back. He had 58 to 23 for Breece Hall. He got into the end zone. He had 13.5 points. It's difficult to trust anyone, but the reason I'm giving Breece Hall even the slightest bit of respect as my RB22, really like a low-end RB2 flex play, is simply because it's the Jets and the Saints. It's anybody's game, in my opinion. The Saints are favored, obviously, at home. It's in a dome, so you don't have to worry about weather, and Breece Hall is a fantastic player. Now, would I be comfortable starting Breece Hall? No, ideally in the playoffs, I'd prefer not to play him, but there are worse names out there to put into your lineup. We know Breece Hall is one touch away from giving you a 16-point floor. Okay, let's go to the Vikings at the Giants. 44.5-point over under. The Vikings are favored, even though it is in New York. Now, this is the first time in months, I would say, since I have labeled Aaron Jones a must start. Why am I labeling Aaron Jones a must start? Well, just a friendly reminder that last week, this entire year, I've been ridiculed on this channel for being a Bill Krosky merit truther, and a lot of you guys were right. But last week, the New York Giants made Bill Krosky Merritt look like a starting running back in the NFL. A really good one, too, where he had almost 100 yards and a touchdown. So now we have Aaron Jones facing the New York Giants. The Giants, not even just last week, are good for running backs. They are the second best matchup for your running backs the entirety of this year when you adjust for schedule, according to 4for4. So Aaron Jones is going to be in my lineups this week as the Vikings are favored in New York. He is the preferred running back. He gets the role on the ground as well as in the air. I'm starting Aaron Jones with some confidence as one of my plays of the week. Now, with the Giants, Tyrone Tracy is my RB14. I am going to go ahead and play him with some confidence. We were very excited to play him last week against the Commanders, and that worked out really well, but I didn't realize exactly how dominant he would be over that role. This is the first time this year where he really completely made Devin Singletary an afterthought. He had 52 snaps compared to 16 for Devin Singletary, 18 touches compared to 6 for Devin Singletary. He looked good, he looked efficient, he looked effective, both on the ground and in the air. I'm going to play him again this week against the Vikings because the Giants running backs, they're just churning out fantasy points at this point. Okay, let's jump to the Chiefs at the Titans. Now, this is the lowest over-under of the week. 37.5 points, and I get it. No Patrick Mahomes, just so we all on the same page. He's done for the year, had a surgery on his ACL in Dallas this week. The Chiefs are favored by 3.5 points in Tennessee. I don't know who wins the game. I don't know, honestly. It doesn't matter. The game is boring. I don't even think Chiefs fans or Titans fans are going to be honest with you and say that they care about this game. I think they'd be lying to you if they did. Okay? Just being honest with you. There's not a single chance in this world I'm starting a Kansas City Chiefs running back. It's a split backfield entirely down the middle. 1 week, Kareem Hunt gets all the work on the goal line and he's an early guy. And then the next week, Isaiah Pacheco gets an early down roll and Kareem Hunt still on short yardage scenarios. I don't care. I don't think it's going to be effective offense. I don't really want to mess around and find out. I'm not playing a Chiefs running back. I'm not doing it with my life on the line. Now, with the Titans, we have seen multiple weeks where Tony Pollard has been really good. And the reason I'm labeling him a spot start, now to be fair, I'm not high on him. He's my RB28, not even inside the top 24. He's a mid RB3 at this point, and it's not a good matchup. It's actually the second worst matchup for your running backs in fantasy football this week. So again, this is not a confidence play. This is just if you need a body, there are worse bodies to play because he's finally getting volume. He had 16 touches last week. That is, far more than Tajay Spears with 5, even though the snaps were really close. When Pollard is on the field, they're very intentional about using him. So that's the only reason why I'm even considering him, because of the amount of volume that he's seen and the hot streak that he's on. But again, I would say 80% of you guys have a better option. Okay, let's jump to the Bengals at the Dolphins. Now, going from the lowest over-under of the week to what is tied for the highest over-under of the week at 50.5 points. It's a 1.5 point spread. It is in favor of Miami, but it's about as close as it can possibly get. Now, for Devon Achane, if you made it to this week of the fantasy playoffs, congratulations, because you're probably making it to next week, because Devon Achane is my RB1 on the week. He faces the Cincinnati Bengals, who are the best matchup in fantasy football right now. By far, it's not even close. Their defense is terrible. They cannot stop anyone. I could probably get 20 yards on 20 touches, and that's a lot, right? Like if I was a running back in the NFL and I faced the Cincinnati Bengals, I would be in the hospital, but I could probably average 1 yard per carry. That is actually very impressive in my opinion, but you're going to start Devon Achane with the ultimate confidence. He should lead you to the next week of the playoffs. And then as far as Chase Brown goes, Joe Burrow, this is great news for Chase Brown, is expected to start the final 3 games for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're playing for pride at this point, and thank God, because Chase Brown really needs, Joe Burrow to be in there for this streak to continue. So both of these guys are must starts. This matchup is very simple. You start Brown, you start Achane, and you call it a day. Okay, let's jump into the Falcons at the Cardinals here. Now, it's a 46.5 point over under. The spread is 1.5 points, so another really close game. Bijan Robinson, a must start. There's no doubt about it. He's going up against the Cardinals, who have been really, really good against running backs as far as a matchup you want to target. They've been terrible defensively. So Woody Marks, I think, played like, 20% of the snaps and had 10 fantasy points last week, for example. So Bijan could have another massive, massive day. Obviously, you're going to start him. On the opposite side, not only do we have no Trey Benson, not only do we have no James Conner, not only do we have, all these guys out, but also Bam Knight, who was kind of an important part of this roster, is no longer available either. He was actually carted off the field last week with an ankle injury. They're describing it as a bad sprain. There's just no chance he plays this week. Now, from the point that we saw Bam Knight get off the field, it really was the Michael Carter show. I mean, in this game, Michael Carter ends up having 18 total opportunities. He played 53 of 66 snaps. DeMarcado was just a spell back at best, and that ended up leading to Michael Carter with a safe 13.4 fantasy performance, a nice floor, and I think that's what he's going to present again here in Week 16. He faces the Falcons. Falcons are the 7th best matchup for your running backs. Now, both the Falcons and the Cardinals are not great teams. It should be competitive. You got Kirko Thuggins throwing the ball on the other side. You got Jacoby Brissett throwing the ball on the opposite side. Both of these teams can make this a ball game. Michael Carter is a volume play, and he's a opportunity if you lost someone, let's say due to injury this week, to plug and play a RB2, low end RB2 flex play. Okay, let's jump to the Jags at the Broncos. 45.5 point over under. The Broncos are favored by 3 points. Now, Travis Etienne is going to be a must start. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Well, we're not going to have to worry about Bashul Tutin. That's for damn sure, because he actually underwent a surgery on his finger, so he's not going to play. He's going to miss a couple weeks. So it is Etienne season coming off his best day of the year. He faces the Broncos. Broncos are middle of the pack against running backs, but this guy is just going to get fed the volume on an offense. I mean, let's give some props to the Jags this year. That is massively improving. As far as RJ Harvey goes, obviously, if he plays, you're going to start him with confidence. If he's not able to get out there, then Jaleel McLaughlin and Tyler Badie, those would be the guys that would probably take his place. However, I think it would be a split backfield. It's not a good matchup that you really want to chase after anyway. So I would probably suggest not starting any Broncos running back if RJ Harvey is not healthy this week. Okay, let's jump to the Steelers at the Lions. This is that other matchup that is tied for the highest over-under of the week. The Lions are favored by 7 points. It is in Detroit, so there will be a dome. And this Pittsburgh Steelers running back room, it just keeps getting more and more confusing. Now, on Monday Night Football, we saw Kenneth Gainwell get 20 opportunities. We had about 13 or 14 for Jaylen Warren. Kenneth Gainwell dominated snaps as well. Obviously, before the game, we heard that we weren't sure if Warren was going to play or not because he was dealing with an illness. So maybe that was just the illness, and that's why we didn't see as much Warren as we might have before. However, with the unknowns of this backfield, with the fact that they can plug and play Kenneth Gainwell without any concerns, and maybe it's a split backfield, maybe it's Gainwell, maybe it's Warren one week, the fact that it's confusing, it might just save you in the end. Because they're playing the Detroit Lions, that is the 3rd worst matchup for your fantasy running back anyway. So maybe you were going to tiptoe around on Jaylen Warren this week. Let's just play it safe if you can and avoid these guys entirely. If you got to play one, I'm still leaning Jaylen Warren because I'm assuming he didn't play as much because of the illness. But again, I prefer to just not worry about this matchup. On the opposite side, you're going to play Jahmyr Gibbs. I know he had a disappointing week this week. Hopefully he still made it through the next round. But let's not forget, we're playing a guy that can either get 3 touchdowns or give you a safe floor. I mean, you can't really be too harsh with Jahmyr Gibbs this year. David Montgomery, I'm not really playing him. Honestly. The only way David Montgomery doesn't bust for you is if he scores a touchdown, and there's no way to predict that week in, week out. So I prefer for him to be on my bench. Okay, the 14th matchup we'll look at here is the Raiders at the Texans. It's the tied for the lowest over-under of the week with the Chiefs-Titans, 37.5 points. Now, the Texans are the largest favorites of the week, 14.5 point favorites in Houston this week. Makes sense. The Raiders are probably the worst team in the NFL. Is that fair to say? If not, bottom 5. Now, Ashton Jeanty, I have labeled a spot start. It is not a good matchup against the Texans. They are the 4th worst matchup for your fantasy running back. But the reason we're okay to play Jeanty if you're in a tough spot is because of the floor he gives with his receiving upside. You know, since the bye week, this guy is averaging about 6 targets per game. So if you're in any sort of half PPR or full PPR league, he gives you a safe floor, but there's a reason he's not labeled a must start. He's my RB26, a high end RB3, flex option at best. But this is, I would be shocked if the Raiders look competitive in this game. So you can look towards other options. Legitimately, you can. Now, with the Texans side of things, I am ranking it on the graphic as if Woody Marks is playing. And if Woody Marks is playing, he's a must start for me. Obviously, last week, before he went out with the injury, he was on track to have just a monster game. I mean, he looked like he was about to go for 25-30 with the way that he was playing against the Cardinals last week. Well, he gets another good matchup this week. He plays the Raiders, who are the third best matchup for your fantasy running backs. So if he's healthy and ready to go, he's probably going to come out of the game and then go back in. Okay, we all know that by now. But if he's healthy and ready to go, he has a chance to put up a huge performance. Now, according to Aaron Wilson of, he's a beat writer for the Texans, he actually mentioned that both Nick Chubb and Woody Marks will be managed day to day throughout the week heading into the game. D'Amico Ryan said, this is what is encouraging for Woody. D'Amico Ryan said that Marks could have gone back into the game if they needed him to. So they were probably just saving him. They were already up big time against the Cardinals. Now, if Marks and Chubb are both out, then Jawar Jordan might be an intriguing option if you're in a desperate spot. The difficult part is if it's a competitive game, we don't know if Jordan or Dare Ogunbowale are going to get opportunities. You would probably lean Jordan just because last week he was the guy that got most of the opportunities. But Dare Ogunbowale is a veteran, and if they need to win games, maybe they trust him more than Jawar Jordan. I think there's a ton of risk in it. But again, he did lead the backfield last week. 17 total opportunities. He looked good doing it. He had 13.8 fantasy points. So again, I'd be hesitant to start anyone in this backfield. But Jawar Jordan is like not a terrible Hail Mary if you have no better options in a deep league. But if only Woody Marks is out, let's say Marks is out and Chubb is playing, then I think Chubb would be taking place of Jordan there. Okay, let's go to Sunday Night Football. We've got the Patriots at the Ravens. 47.5 point over under. The spread is 2.5 points in favor of Baltimore. Travion Henderson, one of my must start players last week, absolutely dominated. You're going to play him again this week. Like I said last week, all the guy needs is one touch. One touch and he can advance you to the next week of the fantasy playoffs. My RB9, Stevenson is much more of a desperation play. You know, he is leading the team in snaps, but when Henderson is on the field, he's a more focal point of that offense. As far as the Ravens go, I'm not able to label Derrick Henry a must start. He's not a player that you have to bench. He's my RB20. He's a low-end RB2, but the Patriots are the worst matchup for your fantasy running backs, and they are a really good team. If the Ravens are down in this game, I am afraid that Derrick Henry could have another dud game. He's really only going to have a good game if the Ravens are up or if he scores a touchdown early. So proceed with caution. I'm telling you, you do not have to start Derrick Henry this week, but it depends on your options. Again, my RB20 in this game. Yes, the fantasy season is coming to an end. Yes, there will be some leagues that you don't win, but even if you're knocked out, you can still play fantasy with myself. I'm setting lineups every week on the FastDraft app. Their Super Slam contest is very simple. All you have to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks, set your lineups, and the most points each week wins the most money. So you can come compete against me each and every week here in week 16, for example. Check out the pinned comment down below. Download the FastDraft app. Use the promo code LAND, and I'll match your deposit up to $50. Let's compete against each other, okay? Let's have some fun. All right, last game we're going to look at here. Very simple. Thursday Night Football, 49ers at Colts, 46.5 point over under. This is about as simple as a matchup gets, and we're saving it for last. CMC and Jonathan Taylor. I'm not going to tell you to sit either of these names, obviously, in the fantasy playoffs. We know Phil Rivers is going to start again. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor was a big focal point of the offense before when Daniel Jones was healthy, but now that Daniel Jones is not healthy, he is the offense. He had 18 carries in the first half. You can run against the 49ers, but purely based off of volume, you're not going to sit JT. He doesn't have the same upside, unfortunately, without Daniel Jones. But go ahead and do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. We've got the wide receiver version of this video coming out later. Appreciate you guys. Let's go get some wins in week 16. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.